The full moon hung heavy over the ceremonial grounds, casting silver light across the assembled pack. Seraphina stood at the center of the ancient stone circle, her swollen belly a stark reminder of the life growing within her. A life that should have been celebrated, but instead marked her shame. Her hands trembled as she clasped them beneath her abdomen, feeling her daughter kick as if sensing her mother's distress. Marcus stood across from her, impossibly handsome in the moonlight, his jaw set with determination. Beside him, her sister Elena glowed with triumph, her hand already resting possessively on Marcus's arm. The sight twisted like a knife in Seraphina's chest. Elena wore white, the ceremonial color of a chosen mate, while Seraphina remained in the gray robes of rejection. "Let the ceremony begin," Elder Rothgar announced, his voice carrying across the hushed crowd. Seraphina could feel hundreds of eyes on her, could smell the mixture of pity and disgust rolling off her packmates in waves. Her wolf whimpered inside her, already feeling the severing that was to come. Marcus stepped forward, and Seraphina forced herself to meet his eyes. Once, those green eyes had looked at her with such tenderness. Now they held only cold resolve. "Seraphina Winterborn," he began, his voice formal and distant. "I, Marcus Thornheart, Alpha of the Silver Moon Pack, hereby reject you as my mate and Luna." The words struck her like physical blows, each syllable resonating through the mate bond that still connected them. Pain bloomed in her chest, sharp and all-consuming. Her knees buckled slightly, but she locked them, refusing to fall before them all. "The bond between us is severed," Marcus continued, raising his hand toward the moon. "I choose another as my true mate, Elena Winterborn, your sister. She will stand beside me as Luna, while you—" A sharp, tearing pain ripped through Seraphina's abdomen, cutting off his words. She gasped, doubling over as liquid gushed down her legs, pooling on the ancient stones beneath her feet. No, not now. It was too early. She still had 3 weeks until her due date. "Seraphina?" Elder Rothgar's voice sharpened with concern. Another contraction seized her, stronger than the first, and this time she couldn't contain her cry. The sound echoed across the ceremonial grounds, silencing the whispers. Seraphina's vision blurred with pain and tears as she clutched her belly, feeling her daughter moving frantically inside her. "She's in labor!" someone shouted from the crowd. Elena's face twisted with irritation, as if Seraphina had planned this interruption. Marcus simply stared, uncertainty crossing his features for the first time that evening. Elder Rothgar moved swiftly to Seraphina's side, his aged hands surprisingly steady as he supported her weight. "Quickly, we must get her to the birthing den. Wait." The eldest of the pack elders, a woman named Morwenna, with eyes like pale moonstones, stepped forward. Her gaze was fixed on Seraphina's belly with an intensity that made Seraphina's skin prickle. The timing, the full moon, the rejection ceremony. Morwenna's voice dropped to a reverent whisper. "It's the prophecy." The crowd erupted in murmurs. Seraphina gritted her teeth against another contraction, barely able to focus on the elder's words. "What prophecy?" Marcus demanded, his authority as Alpha reasserting itself despite the chaos. Morwenna turned to face the assembled pack, her ancient voice carrying across the grounds. 3 centuries ago, the moon goddess herself spoke through the oracle. She foretold of a child born during a rejection ceremony under the full moon, a child who would unite all the werewolf kingdoms and usher in a new era of peace. Her moonstone eyes fixed on Seraphina. But there was a condition. Seraphina could barely breathe through the pain, but something in the elder's tone made her listen. "The child must be delivered by the hand of the Alpha King himself. No other may touch the pup during the birth, or the prophecy will be broken and the child will be ordinary." Morwenna's weathered hand touched Seraphina's shoulder gently. "We must summon Drake Nightshade immediately." The name sent a ripple of fear and awe through the crowd. Drake Nightshade, the Alpha King, who ruled all werewolf territories with an iron fist. Seraphina had never seen him, though stories of his power and ruthlessness were legendary. He was said to be unmated despite his 32 years, having rejected every female put before him, claiming none were worthy to stand as his queen. "That's impossible," Marcus protested. "The Alpha King's palace is 3 days' ride from here. She'll have delivered long before. Then we pray he comes swiftly," Elder Hrothgar interrupted, nodding to a young wolf at the edge of the circle. "Rider, take the fastest horse and ride with all speed. Tell the Alpha King that the prophecy child is being born. Go!" The young wolf shifted instantly, his clothes shredding as his massive gray form burst forth. He was gone in seconds, racing toward the horizon faster than any horse could run. Seraphina cried out again as another contraction tore through her, stronger and closer than the last. Time seemed to blur into an endless cycle of pain. The elders supported her, guiding her toward the edge of the ceremonial circle, but Morwenna held up a staying hand. "She cannot be moved to the birthing den. The prophecy specifies the ceremonial grounds under the full moon. She must deliver here, in the sacred circle." The elder's expression was apologetic but firm. "I'm sorry, child." Horror washed over Seraphina. To give birth here, exposed before the entire pack, while they waited for an Alpha King who might not even arrive in time? The humiliation of the rejection ceremony paled in comparison. "This is ridiculous." Elena's sharp voice cut through the night. "You're going to risk her life and the baby's on some ancient fairy tale?" For the first time since this nightmare began, Seraphina felt a spark of gratitude toward her sister. But Morwenna's expression remained unchanged. "The prophecy is clear. If we deviate, the child's destiny will be lost." She turned to Seraphina, her ancient eyes softening. "Be strong, young one. The goddess would not demand what you cannot endure." Seraphina wanted to laugh hysterically at that. The goddess had already demanded more than she could endure, watching her mate choose her sister, being rejected while pregnant with his child, and now this. But another contraction stole her breath, and all she could do was focus on surviving each wave of pain. The pack formed a circle around her, maintaining the ceremonial boundary while giving her what little privacy they could. Someone brought furs and blankets, creating a makeshift birthing area on the cold stone. The elders attended her, their hands careful, but unable to assist with the actual delivery. They could only wait and pray that Drake Nightshade would arrive before it was too late. Time lost meaning. Seraphina existed in a world of pain and pressure, her body laboring to bring forth life even as her heart shattered from rejection. She could feel the mate bond with Marcus fraying, unraveling thread by thread, as the rejection ceremony remained incomplete but inevitable. Her daughter kicked and shifted inside her, as if fighting her own battle to enter the world. "How long has it been?" Seraphina managed to gasp during a brief respite. 2 hours, Elder Hrothgar answered quietly. "The labor is progressing quickly for a first pup. Too quickly. If the Alpha King didn't arrive soon, her daughter would be born without him, and the prophecy, if it was even real, would be broken." Part of Seraphina didn't care about prophecies or destinies. She just wanted her daughter to be healthy, to survive this premature birth. But another part of her, the part that had just been publicly rejected and humiliated, clung desperately to the idea that her child might be special, might be destined for something greater than this pack that had watched her shame without protest. The wind shifted suddenly, carrying a scent that made every wolf in the circle stiffen. Power rolled across the ceremonial grounds like thunder before a storm, ancient, overwhelming, and absolutely dominant. Seraphina's wolf, who had been whimpering in pain and sorrow, suddenly raised her head, alert and trembling with something that wasn't quite fear. "He's here," Morwenna breathed, and Seraphina couldn't tell if the elder's tone held relief or terror. Then she heard it. The sound of massive paws hitting earth at impossible speed, moving faster than any wolf should be able to run. The assembled pack parted like water, creating a path to the ceremonial circle's center where Seraphina labored. And then he was there. Drake Nightshade stood at the edge of the circle in his wolf form, a massive creature of midnight black fur and eyes that glowed amber in the moonlight. He was easily twice the size of any wolf Seraphina had ever seen, his presence so powerful that she felt it pressing against her skin like a physical force. For a moment, he simply stood there, his glowing eyes fixed on her with an intensity that made her breath catch despite her pain. Then he shifted. The transformation was fluid and instantaneous, power rippling across his form as the wolf gave way to the man. Drake Nightshade stood before her, and Seraphina's pain-hazed mind struggled to process what she was seeing. He was tall, easily 6.5 feet, with broad shoulders and a warrior's build barely contained by the black clothing he wore. His face was all sharp angles and hard planes, handsome in a dangerous way that made her wolf whimper for an entirely different reason. His hair was black as midnight, falling past his shoulders, and those amber eyes that had glowed in wolf form remained bright and piercing in his human face. But what struck her most was the way he looked at her, not with the pity she'd seen in the elder's eyes, or the disgust she'd felt from her pack. His gaze held something fierce and possessive that made her heart stutter in her chest. "Everyone out." Drake's voice was deep and commanding, brooking no argument, except the elders who know the ritual. "Now." The pack scattered immediately, even Marcus backing away without protest when the Alpha King's eyes briefly fixed on him with unmistakable contempt. Elena was ushered away by pack members, her protests dying when Drake's gaze flicked to her for just a moment. Only Morwenna, Hrothgar, and one other elder remained, positioning themselves at the cardinal points around Seraphina's makeshift birthing bed. Drake moved forward with surprising grace for such a large man, dropping to his knees beside Seraphina without any apparent concern for the blood and fluid that stained the furs beneath her. Up close, his scent washed over her, pine and snow and something wild and untamed that made her wolf keen with sudden, inexplicable longing. "I've got you," he said quietly, and despite meeting him only seconds ago, Seraphina believed him. His hands were warm and steady as they pressed gently against her swollen belly, and the moment his skin touched hers, something shifted inside her. The pain didn't vanish, but it became manageable, bearable. Her wolf stopped whimpering and instead pushed forward, trying to get closer to this male who smelled of power and safety, and something else she couldn't quite name. "The child is in distress," Drake said, his eyes never leaving Seraphina's face, even as his hands moved expertly across her abdomen, assessing the pup's position. The premature labor, combined with the stress of the rejection. His jaw tightened, a muscle jumping beneath his skin. "This is going to be difficult. Can you save her?" Seraphina gasped as another contraction built. "My daughter, please. Both of you will survive this," Drake said. And it wasn't a promise but a command, as if he could order reality itself to bend to his will. "I need you to trust me. Can you do that?" Seraphina looked into those amber eyes and saw absolute certainty there. This male she'd never met, this Alpha King who had raced across miles of territory to reach her. She trusted him more than she'd trusted anyone in months. "Yes," she whispered. "Good." His hand moved to cup her face, his thumb brushing away a tear she hadn't realized had fallen. "Then let's bring your daughter into this world." The next hour was a blur of pain and pressure, but through it all, Drake's presence anchored her. His voice guided her through each contraction, his hands steady and sure as he helped her body do what it was meant to do. The elders chanted ancient words in the old tongue, calling on the moon goddess to bless this birth and fulfill the prophecy. Seraphina pushed until she thought she might break, until her throat was raw from screaming, until the world narrowed to Drake's amber eyes and his voice telling her she was strong, she was brave, she could do this. And then, finally, Blessedly, she felt the rush of release as her daughter slipped free into Drake's waiting hands. The crying started immediately, a strong, healthy wail that made Seraphina sob with relief. Through her tears and exhaustion, she watched as Drake carefully cleaned the tiny pup, his massive hands impossibly gentle as he tended to her daughter with practiced ease. "She's perfect," he murmured, and there was wonder in his voice that made Seraphina's heart clench. As Drake wrapped the pup in clean white cloth and brought her toward Seraphina, something extraordinary happened. The moment his skin made contact with the baby's forehead, a golden light blazed forth, bright enough to make the elders gasp. The light swirled and condensed, forming itself into a mark on the pup's tiny forehead, a crescent moon surrounded by stars, glowing with divine radiance. "The prophecy," Morwenna breathed, falling to her knees. "The goddess has marked her chosen child." But Seraphina barely heard the elder's words. All she could see was Drake's face as he stared down at her daughter, amber eyes wide with something that looked like recognition. His hands trembled slightly, the first sign of anything less than perfect control she'd seen from him, and when his gaze lifted to meet hers, Seraphina's breath caught at the intensity burning there. Something passed between them in that moment, something that made her wolf surge forward with sudden, desperate need. Drake's eyes flashed amber, his wolf clearly rising to the surface, and the air between them seemed to crackle with electricity. Then the moment passed, and Drake was gently placing her daughter in her arms, his expression schooling itself back into careful neutrality. But Seraphina had seen what lurked beneath that control, and it terrified and thrilled her in equal measure. Her daughter was warm and solid against her chest, her crying subsiding as she found her mother's heartbeat. Seraphina counted tiny fingers and toes, marveling at the perfection of this little life she'd created. The golden mark on her forehead pulsed gently, like a second heartbeat. "Luna," Seraphina whispered, the name coming to her as naturally as breathing. "Her name is Luna." "Luna," Drake repeated, his voice rough. "It suits her." The elders were whispering frantically among themselves, clearly discussing the implications of the prophecy's fulfillment. But Drake ignored them, his attention fixed on Seraphina and the pup in her arms. "You need rest," he said firmly, "and proper care. Both of you are under my protection now." "What?" Seraphina looked up at him, confused and exhausted. "I don't understand." "The prophecy, child, is my responsibility," Drake said, rising to his feet with fluid grace. "Which means you are my responsibility as well. You'll both come to my palace to recover. It isn't a request." Before Seraphina could protest, though truthfully, she wasn't sure she wanted to, Marcus's voice rang out from beyond the ceremonial circle. "You have no right to take my mate and pup!" Drake turned slowly, and even from her position on the furs, Seraphina could see the deadly promise in his posture. "Your mate?" he asked, his voice soft and dangerous. "I was under the impression you were in the process of rejecting her when the pup decided to make her entrance." Marcus had the grace to look uncomfortable, but he didn't back down. "The ceremony wasn't completed. The bond still exists." "Consider it completed," Drake interrupted, his voice dropping to a growl that made every wolf in hearing distance bare their throats in submission. "Seraphina Winterborn, do you accept Marcus Thornheart's rejection?" Seraphina looked at Marcus, at the male who should have stood beside her, protected her, chosen her. Then she looked at her daughter, at the golden mark that proclaimed Luna's destiny. Finally, her gaze returned to Drake, to this powerful stranger who had delivered her pup with gentle hands and was now offering them sanctuary. "I accept the rejection," she said clearly, her voice carrying across the ceremonial grounds. "The bond between Marcus Thornheart and myself is severed." The words resonated through her, and she felt the mate bond finally snap, breaking cleanly instead of fraying apart. The pain was sharp but brief, and then nothing. Just emptiness where Marcus had once lived in her heart. Drake's expression flickered with something that might have been approval before he bent down and without warning, scooped Seraphina and Luna both into his arms as if they weighed nothing. "You can't just take her," Elena's voice shrilled from the crowd. "She's Pack. She belongs here." Drake's amber eyes found Elena in the crowd, and his lip curled in disgust. "Did she belong here when you stole her mate? Did she belong here when your entire pack watched her be rejected while carrying a child?" His voice was scathing. "Seraphina and her daughter are under my protection now. Anyone who challenges that challenges me directly." No one spoke. No one dared. As Drake carried them away from the ceremonial grounds, Seraphina felt the eyes of her former pack watching them go. She should have felt shame or loss, but instead, as she held her daughter close and felt the steady strength of the Alpha King carrying them both, all she felt was relief. And beneath that relief, buried but growing, was something else. A warmth spreading through her chest every time Drake's scent surrounded her, every time his amber eyes met hers with that fierce protectiveness she didn't yet understand. Her daughter's mark glowed softly against her skin, and Seraphina wondered what destiny the moon goddess had planned for them all. Whatever it was, as Drake settled her into a luxurious carriage that had appeared at the edge of the territory, Seraphina knew that nothing would ever be the same again. The carriage swayed gently as it rolled through the night, its interior far more luxurious than anything Seraphina had ever experienced in the Silver Moon Pack. Soft velvet cushions cradled her exhausted body, and thick furs kept both her and Luna warm against the chill that had settled over the land. Through the window, she watched the familiar territories of her former pack disappear into the darkness behind them, each passing mile taking her further from everything she'd ever known. Drake sat across from her, his massive frame somehow folded into the seat with a grace that seemed impossible for someone so large. His amber eyes hadn't left Luna's tiny sleeping form since they'd entered the carriage, and Seraphina found herself studying him in the dim light of the enchanted lanterns that hung from the ceiling. He was devastatingly handsome in a way that made her uncomfortable, not because she feared him, but because her wolf kept pressing forward with an eagerness that felt wrong so soon after her rejection. "How long until we reach your kingdom?" she asked quietly, breaking the silence that had stretched between them for nearly an hour. Drake's gaze lifted to meet hers, and she felt that same electric jolt she'd experienced when he'd first touched her during the delivery. "We'll arrive at the Obsidian Palace by dawn. The journey would normally take 3 days, but my wolves run faster than most, and the carriage is enchanted for speed and comfort." His voice was rough velvet in the darkness. "You should rest. You've been through an ordeal." "I don't think I can sleep." Seraphina looked down at Luna, who was nestled in a basket lined with the softest blankets she'd ever touched. The golden mark on her daughter's forehead pulsed gently with each tiny breath, casting a faint glow across her perfect features. "Every time I close my eyes, I see everything. The rejection, the ceremony, the way they all looked at me." Something dangerous flickered across Drake's face. "Your former pack failed you. Your former mate failed you." He leaned forward slightly, his elbows resting on his knees, bringing his face closer to hers in the intimate space. "But they will never touch you or your daughter again. You have my word on that." The fierce protectiveness in his tone made Seraphina's breath catch. She didn't understand why the Alpha King would care so much about a rejected she-wolf and her illegitimate pup, prophecy or not. Surely he had more important matters to attend to than escorting them personally back to his kingdom. As if reading her thoughts, Drake's expression softened slightly. "I know you have questions. When you're stronger, when you've had time to heal, I'll answer all of them. But for now, just know that you and Luna are safe. That has to be enough." Seraphina nodded, too tired to push for more. Luna stirred in her basket, making the soft mewling sounds that newborns made, and instantly Seraphina felt her body respond, her breasts aching with the need to feed her daughter. She reached for the basket, but Drake was faster, lifting Luna with such gentle care that Seraphina's heart clenched. "May I?" he asked, and she realized he was asking permission to hold her daughter, to pass her to Seraphina, rather than simply handing her over like a package. "Yes," she whispered. Drake cradled Luna against his broad chest for just a moment, and Serafina watched in fascination as the Alpha King's fierce expression melted into something tender and wondering. Luna's tiny hand escaped the blankets and wrapped around Drake's finger, and he went completely still, staring down at the pup with an intensity that made Serafina's wolf whimper with longing. "She's strong," he murmured. "I can feel her wolf already. That's rare for one so newly born." "Is that because of the prophecy?" Serafina asked, as Drake carefully transferred Luna to her arms. "Perhaps. Or perhaps she's simply her mother's daughter." The compliment caught Serafina off guard. Marcus had spent the last months of her pregnancy telling her how weak she was, how disappointed he was that she couldn't shift while carrying their pup, how she'd embarrassed him by getting pregnant before they'd completed the mating bond. To hear this powerful male call her strong felt like balm on wounds she hadn't realized were still bleeding. She positioned Luna to feed, grateful for the privacy screen that Drake immediately erected using a silk cloth he produced from somewhere in the carriage. His thoughtfulness surprised her almost as much as his gentleness had. Everything she'd heard about the Alpha King painted him as ruthless and cold, a warrior who showed no mercy to his enemies and expected absolute obedience from his subjects. Yet with her and Luna, he was nothing but careful and considerate. As Luna nursed, Serafina felt some of her tension finally begin to ease. The rhythmic motion soothed them both, and she found her eyes growing heavy despite her earlier claim that she couldn't sleep. Through the privacy screen, she could hear Drake moving slightly, could smell his scent of pine and snow and wild things, and somehow that made her feel safer than she'd felt in months. "Drake?" she said softly, not sure if he was even listening. "Yes?" "Thank you, for coming when the pack sent for you, for delivering Luna, for—" Her voice cracked slightly. "For getting us away from there." A long pause, and then, "You never have to thank me for protecting what's mine." The possessiveness in his tone should have alarmed her, but instead, her wolf preened with satisfaction, pressing against Serafina's consciousness with an eagerness that was almost embarrassing. She was too exhausted to analyze what that meant, too overwhelmed by everything that had happened in the span of a few hours. So she simply let herself drift, lulled by the rocking of the carriage and the warmth of her daughter in her arms, and eventually, despite everything, sleep claimed her. Serafina woke to golden light streaming through the carriage windows and the sound of Drake's deep voice speaking in low tones to someone outside. Luna was still sleeping peacefully in her basket, and someone, Drake, she realized, had covered Serafina with an additional fur while she slept. The thoughtfulness of the gesture made her chest tight. She pushed herself up carefully, her body protesting the movement. Everything ached, from the obvious soreness of having given birth to the deeper pain of muscles strained and bones weary. But there was something else too, a strange emptiness where the mate bond with Marcus had been. She'd expected it to hurt more, the severing, but instead it just felt hollow, as if she'd been carrying a weight for so long that now its absence left her unbalanced. The carriage door opened and Drake's head appeared, his amber eyes immediately finding hers with an intensity that made her heart skip. "You're awake. Good, we've arrived." Serafina looked past him and felt her breath leave her body in a rush. The Obsidian Palace rose before them like something out of a dream, or perhaps a beautiful nightmare. Black stone towers reached toward the sky, their surfaces catching the morning light and reflecting it back in shades of midnight blue and deep purple. The palace was surrounded by walls that seemed to shimmer with protective enchantments, and beyond them she could see the sprawling city that served as the heart of the Obsidian Kingdom. "It's magnificent," she whispered. Pride flickered across Drake's face. "My ancestors built it to withstand any siege, any attack. These walls have never been breached." He stepped fully into the carriage and offered her his hand. "Can you walk, or shall I carry you?" Serafina wanted to say she could walk, wanted to maintain some shred of dignity and independence. But when she tried to stand, Her legs trembled so badly that she would have fallen if Drake hadn't caught her immediately. Without waiting for permission, he scooped her into his arms, holding her against his chest as if she weighed nothing. I can... She started to protest. You can accept help, Drake interrupted firmly. You gave birth less than 12 hours ago, Seraphina. Your strength will return, but for now, let me carry you. Another male wolf appeared at Drake's side, smaller than the Alpha King but still impressively built, with sandy brown hair and intelligent hazel eyes. He moved with the easy confidence of someone who knew his place and was comfortable in it. Cyrus, my beta, Drake introduced, nodding toward the other male. He'll bring Luna. I trust him with my life, and you can trust him with hers. Cyrus bowed respectfully to Seraphina before carefully lifting Luna's basket, his movements as gentle as Drake's had been. It's an honor, my lady. The entire palace has been preparing for your arrival. I'm not a lady, Seraphina said automatically. I'm just... The mother of the prophecy child, Drake interrupted, his voice brooking no argument. And under my personal protection. That makes you more than worthy of the title. His arms tightened around her slightly. You'll have your own suite of rooms in the family wing of the palace, healers and servants to attend to whatever you need, and guards who will die before they let anyone harm you or Luna. The family wing. The words echoed in Seraphina's mind as Drake carried her through massive gates that swung open at their approach. Pack members lined the courtyard, all of them dropping to one knee as their Alpha King passed. Seraphina felt their curious eyes on her and pulled closer to Drake's chest instinctively, seeking shelter from their scrutiny. They're staring, she whispered. They're showing respect, Drake corrected. By tomorrow, every wolf in my kingdom will know that you and your daughter are to be protected as if you were royalty itself. Anyone who disrespects you disrespects me. They entered the palace through doors that were twice as tall as Drake and carved with intricate scenes of wolves running beneath the moon. The interior was just as impressive as the exterior, all polished black marble and silver accents, with tapestries depicting the history of the werewolf kingdoms hanging from the walls. Servants scurried about, but they all stopped and bowed when Drake appeared, their eyes widening when they saw Seraphina in his arms. Drake carried her through corridors that seemed to go on forever, climbing a grand staircase with steps so smooth they looked like glass. Finally, he stopped before a set of double doors made of dark wood inlaid with silver moons and stars. Your rooms, he said simply, and the doors swung open to reveal a suite that made Seraphina's breath catch. The main chamber was larger than the entire house she'd lived in back at the Silver Moon Pack. A massive bed dominated one wall, its posts carved from dark wood and draped with silk curtains in shades of deep blue and silver. Plush rugs covered the floor, and a fireplace already crackled with welcoming warmth. But what caught her attention most was the smaller room visible through an archway, a nursery, complete with a cradle that looked like it had been carved by master craftsmen, its surface decorated with protective runes that glowed softly in the light. Drake set her down carefully on the bed, which was so soft she sank into it immediately. Cyrus entered behind them and placed Luna's basket beside Seraphina, the pup still sleeping peacefully despite all the movement. The healers will be here within the hour to check on you both, Drake said, his voice all business now despite the gentleness with which he arranged pillows behind Seraphina's back. There's a bathing room through that door, already filled with heated water and healing herbs. Clothes in the wardrobe that should fit you. Food will be brought up immediately. Drake, I can't possibly... You can and you will. His amber eyes met hers with unmistakable command. You've been living in a pack that didn't value you, didn't provide for you the way they should have. That ends now. You are under my roof, and you will want for nothing. Do you understand? Seraphina could only nod, overwhelmed by his intensity and the sheer luxury of her surroundings. This didn't make sense. Why would the Alpha King go to such lengths for her? The prophecy explained his interest in Luna, but this level of care and attention for Seraphina herself went far beyond duty or obligation. As if sensing her confusion, Drake's expression softened slightly. He reached out and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, his fingers lingering against her cheek for just a moment longer than necessary. The touch sent electricity racing through Seraphina's body, and her wolf surged forward with a desperate need that made her gasp. Drake's eyes flashed amber, his wolf clearly responding to hers, but he pulled his hand back and stepped away. Rest, heal, bond with your daughter. Everything else can wait. He turned to leave, Cyrus following, but Seraphina found herself calling out, "Will I see you again? Or are you going to leave me locked in this beautiful cage?" Drake paused in the doorway, looking back at her with an expression that made her heart race. "You'll see me. More than you probably want to." A slight smile curved his lips, transforming his harsh features into something breathtaking. "This is not a cage, Seraphina. This is a sanctuary, and I will never be far." Then he was gone, and Seraphina was left alone with her sleeping daughter, and more questions than answers. 3 days passed in a blur of healing and adjustment. The palace healers had examined both Seraphina and Luna thoroughly, pronouncing them both healthy despite the traumatic birth. Seraphina's body was recovering faster than normal, which the healers attributed to the strength of her wolf and the quality of care she was receiving. Luna continued to thrive, growing stronger each day, the golden mark on her forehead a constant reminder of the destiny that awaited her. True to his word, Drake visited every day, though his visits were brief and always formal. He would inquire about their health, ensure they had everything they needed, and then leave before Seraphina could gather the courage to ask the questions burning inside her. But she felt his presence constantly, sensed him somewhere nearby, even when she couldn't see him, as if some invisible thread connected them. Her wolf grew increasingly restless, pacing and whining whenever Drake left, pushing Seraphina toward a truth she wasn't ready to face. But she couldn't deny the pull she felt toward the Alpha King. The way her heart raced when he entered a room, the way his scent made her wolf purr with contentment. On the fourth morning, Seraphina woke to find a breakfast tray beside her bed and a note written in bold, masculine handwriting. "Join me for lunch in the garden, if you feel strong enough. D." Her heart fluttered ridiculously at the invitation. She'd been confined to her rooms at the healer's insistence, and while the suite was beautiful, she was desperate to see more of the palace and grounds. More importantly, she wanted to spend time with Drake without the formal distance he'd been maintaining. She fed Luna and bathed carefully, then examined the wardrobe that had been stocked with more clothes than she'd owned in her entire life. She selected a simple dress in deep green that brought out the silver in her eyes, grateful that it fit her post-pregnancy body comfortably. A servant appeared as if summoned by thought alone, offering to watch Luna while Seraphina went to meet the Alpha King. The woman was elderly and kind-faced, with the mark of the palace staff on her shoulder. "I've delivered 11 pups of my own, my lady," she said gently. "Your little one will be perfectly safe with me. And if she needs you, I'll fetch you immediately." Seraphina hesitated, her instincts screaming at her not to leave her daughter, but Luna was sleeping peacefully, and the woman's scent was honest and trustworthy. Finally, she nodded and allowed a guard to escort her through the palace. The gardens were breathtaking. Acres of carefully tended plants and flowers, with paths winding between beds of roses and moonflowers. At the center was a small clearing with a table set for two, and Drake stood beside it, looking out over his kingdom. He wore simple clothes, dark pants and a white shirt with the sleeves rolled up to reveal muscular forearms. And for the first time since she'd met him, he looked almost relaxed. He turned when he heard her approach, and something in his expression made her steps falter. The way he looked at her, like she was something precious and vital, stole her breath. "You came," he said, as if he'd doubted she would. "You invited me." Seraphina moved closer, hyper-aware of every inch of space between them. "And I was going mad in those rooms, beautiful as they are." Drake's lips twitched with amusement. "I thought you might be. The healers wanted you confined for a week, but I suspected you wouldn't last that long." He pulled out a chair for her, the gesture courtly and old-fashioned. "How is Luna?" Perfect. Growing stronger every day. The mark on her forehead glows brighter when she's awake. Serafina settled into the chair, grateful when Drake sat across from her rather than hovering. Your servant, Mara, is watching her. She seems trustworthy. She is. She practically raised me after my mother died. Drake poured wine for himself and water for Serafina, his movements economical and graceful. I wouldn't have suggested she watch Luna if I had any doubts. They ate in companionable silence for a few moments, and Serafina found herself watching Drake from beneath her lashes. In the daylight, she could see details she'd missed before, the faint scars that marked his hands and forearms, evidence of countless battles. The way his hair caught the sunlight and revealed hints of deep blue in its black depths. The strength in his jaw and the intelligence in his eyes. You're staring, Drake said without looking up from his plate. Serafina felt heat flood her cheeks. I'm trying to figure you out. And what have you concluded? Now he did look at her, amber eyes bright with curiosity. That you're nothing like what I expected. The stories about you. They make you sound cold and ruthless. But with Luna and me, you've been nothing but kind. Something dark crossed Drake's face. I am cold and ruthless. I've killed countless enemies of this kingdom. I've passed judgment on traitors and watched them die without a shred of mercy. I rule with an iron fist because that's what keeps the werewolf territories from descending into chaos. He leaned forward slightly. But with you and Luna, you bring out something I thought I'd buried long ago. What? Serafina whispered. Tenderness. Hope. The desire to protect rather than destroy. His hand moved across the table, not quite touching hers but close enough that she could feel the heat of his skin. You should know something, Serafina. Know it before this goes any further. Her heart hammered against her ribs. Know what? The moment I touched you during Luna's birth, I felt it. The mate bond. Drake's voice was rough with emotion. You're my true mate. My second chance mate. Given to me by the moon goddess herself. The world seemed to tilt around Serafina. She'd suspected her wolf had known, but hearing him say it made it real. That's not possible. I just came from a rejected bond. The moon goddess doesn't give second chances so quickly. She does when the first bond was wrong from the start. Drake's eyes held hers with burning intensity. Marcus was never your true mate, Serafina. The bond you felt with him was a false one, or perhaps a lesser one meant to guide you toward your true destiny. But you and I, we're meant to be together. I knew it the instant I scented you. Tears pricked Serafina's eyes. I can't do this again. I can't survive another rejection. I would never reject you. Drake's hand finally closed over hers, his touch sending sparks racing up her arm. But I won't pressure you either. You've been through trauma that most wolves wouldn't survive. You need time to heal, to find yourself again, to learn to trust. I can wait. I've waited 32 years to find my true mate. I can wait as long as you need. Serafina stared at their joined hands, feeling her wolf howling with joy inside her, demanding that she accept this mate immediately, that she complete the bond and claim what was hers. But the human part of her, the part that had been shattered by Marcus's rejection, hesitated. What if I'm not who you think I am? She asked quietly. What if I'm just a broken she-wolf with a special daughter? What if the moon goddess made a mistake? Drake stood, still holding her hand, and pulled her gently to her feet. He raised his other hand to cup her face, his thumb brushing across her cheekbone with devastating tenderness. You are the strongest wolf I've ever met. You survived betrayal and rejection. You brought a prophecy child into the world under impossible circumstances. You chose to protect your daughter over your own pride when you accepted my help. His forehead touched hers, and Serafina felt her eyes flutter closed. The moon goddess doesn't make mistakes, and neither does my wolf. You are mine, Serafina, and if you'll have me, I am yours. For a moment, Suspended in that perfect instant with Drake's warmth surrounding her and his scent filling her lungs, Serafina let herself believe it might be possible, that she might have a second chance at love, at happiness, at a mate who would cherish her the way she deserved. Then a servant's panicked voice shattered the moment. "Alpha King, come quickly! There's been an attack!" Drake was moving instantly, but he kept Serafina's hand in his, pulling her along as they raced back toward the palace. "What kind of attack?" he demanded. "Lady Vivian," the servant gasped, struggling to keep up with Drake's long strides. "She tried to poison the she-wolf's food. We caught her before the tray was delivered, but—" Ice flooded Serafina's veins. "Luna, is she—" "Your daughter is safe," the servant assured quickly. "But Lady Vivian is demanding an audience. She says she has the right to challenge for the position of Alpha Queen." Drake's expression turned murderous, his eyes flashing amber as his wolf surged to the surface. "She has no such right, and she'll die for threatening what's mine." They burst into the throne room to find a woman being restrained by two guards. She was beautiful in a harsh way, with raven black hair and cold blue eyes. The moment she saw Drake enter with Serafina at his side, her face twisted with rage. "That's her?" Lady Vivian spat. "That pathetic, rejected she-wolf is what you choose over me? I've been courting you for 5 years, Drake. My bloodline is impeccable, my pack powerful. She's nothing, a cast-off carrying another male's bastard." Drake released Serafina's hand only to step in front of her protectively, his body a wall between her and Vivian's hatred. "You will refer to her as Lady Serafina, or you will not speak at all." His voice was deadly calm. "And you will explain why I shouldn't execute you immediately for attempting to murder someone under my protection." Vivian laughed bitterly. "Under your protection? Everyone knows what that really means. You've taken her as your whore, given her a place in your bed because you're fascinated by the prophecy child. But she can never be your queen, Drake. The council will never accept a rejected wolf with impure bloodlines." "Enough!" Drake's command cracked through the air like thunder. "The council does not choose my mate. The moon goddess does. And she has chosen Serafina." The silence that followed was deafening. Vivian's eyes widened with disbelief, then narrowed with pure hatred as she looked at Serafina. "She's your mate? That's impossible. We were promised. We were never promised anything. Your father hoped for a match between our packs, but I never agreed to it. I told you 5 years ago that you were not my mate and never would be." Drake's voice was cold enough to freeze blood. "You ignored my rejection and continued to pursue me. That was your choice. But attempting murder goes beyond inappropriate courtship. You've committed treason against your Alpha King by threatening his mate." Vivian struggled against the guards holding her. "I'll appeal to the council. They'll overturn this. You can't just claim some nobody as your queen." "I can, and I will." Drake turned slightly, reaching back for Serafina's hand and pulling her forward to stand beside him. "And anyone who challenges that challenges me directly. Vivian Blackwood, for the crime of attempted murder and treason, I sentence you to exile. You and your family will leave the Obsidian Kingdom by nightfall. If you ever return, the sentence will be death. You can't. I am the Alpha King. I can do whatever I wish within my kingdom." Drake's eyes glowed amber, his wolf fully present and terrifying. "Count yourself lucky that I'm showing mercy because Serafina is standing beside me. If she weren't here, your blood would already be staining my floor. Now get out of my sight." The guards dragged Vivian away, her screams of protest echoing through the throne room. Other pack members who had gathered to witness the scene began to disperse, their eyes lingering on Serafina with a mixture of curiosity and respect. When they were finally alone, Drake turned to face Serafina fully, his hands coming up to frame her face. "Are you all right? Did she frighten you?" "I'm fine. I'm more concerned about Luna." "Already checked on. I had Cyrus verify her safety the moment we received word of the threat." Drake's thumbs brushed away tears Serafina hadn't realized were falling. "You're safe. Luna is safe." And Vivian will never threaten either of you again. She was right, though, wasn't she? Seraphina whispered. The council will never accept me as your queen. I'm nothing, Drake. A rejected mate with no pack and no bloodline worth mentioning. They'll fight this. Let them try. Drake's voice was fierce. I've spent my entire life doing what's best for the kingdom, putting duty before everything else. But you and Luna? You're mine to protect, mine to cherish, and I will burn down anyone who tries to take you from me. The possessiveness in his tone should have alarmed her, but instead, Seraphina felt something inside her chest crack open, letting in a flood of warmth and hope she'd thought was lost forever. She reached up and touched Drake's face, feeling the rough stubble on his jaw, and watched his eyes flutter closed at the contact. I'm scared, she admitted. Scared that this is too good to be true. Scared that I'll wake up and find it was all a dream. Scared that you'll change your mind. I won't. Drake's eyes opened, and the certainty in them stole her breath. I've waited my whole life for you, Seraphina. I'm not letting you go. Before she could respond, the throne room doors burst open again, and this time the presence that entered made Seraphina's blood run cold. Marcus strode in, Elena trailing behind him, both of them flanked by Silver Moon Pack warriors. Alpha King, Marcus said, his voice formal but edged with steel. I've come to claim what's mine. Drake's arms came around Seraphina instantly, pulling her against his chest as he faced Marcus with barely contained rage. You have no claim here, Thornheart. The rejection was completed. The bond is severed. The bond was severed under duress, Marcus argued, his green eyes fixing on Seraphina with an intensity that made her want to hide. I've come to tell you the truth. Elena manipulated me with dark magic. She made me believe Seraphina had been unfaithful, that the child wasn't mine. But I know now that I was wrong. That pup is mine by right of blood, and Seraphina is still my mate in the eyes of the moon goddess. You're lying, Seraphina said, her voice shaking but determined. She stepped out from behind Drake, forcing herself to face the male who had destroyed her. You rejected me of your own free will. You chose my sister. There was no magic involved, just your own selfishness and cruelty. Elena, to Seraphina's surprise, looked stricken rather than triumphant. He's not lying about the magic, she said quietly, not meeting anyone's eyes. I did use a spell. I wanted Marcus so badly that I convinced myself it was justified. I made him see things that weren't real, feel things that weren't his own. I'm so sorry, Sarah. The throne room seemed to spin around Seraphina. All these months of thinking Marcus had simply stopped loving her, that she hadn't been good enough, and it had been magic? Manipulation? It doesn't matter, Drake said coldly, his hand finding the small of Seraphina's back, steadying her. Magic or not, the rejection was completed. The bond is broken, and Seraphina is my mate now. Marcus's expression hardened. Then I invoke my right as the child's father. That pup shares my blood. By law, I have a claim to her. Luna is protected by prophecy, Drake countered. She's not subject to pack law. Then let the council decide. Marcus's smile was sharp and triumphant. Prove the prophecy is real. Send the child to the sacred temple for testing, as is tradition for any wolf claiming divine favor. If the prophecy is true, I'll withdraw my claim. But if it's false... His eyes locked on Seraphina. Then both mother and daughter returned to Silver Moon Pack with me. Drake's body vibrated with barely suppressed violence, but before he could respond, an elderly wolf stepped forward from the gathered crowd. One of the council members, Seraphina realized with growing dread. Marcus Thornheart is correct, the counselor said gravely. Ancient law requires that prophecy children be verified by the priests of the sacred temple. The Alpha King cannot claim special protection for the pup without proof of her divine purpose. This is ridiculous, Drake growled. You all saw the mark appear when I delivered her. You heard the prophecy spoken by Silvermoon's elders. Marks can be faked with magic, another counselor interrupted, and elders can be mistaken or manipulated. The law exists for a reason, Alpha King. We cannot have every wolf claiming divine favor for their offspring. Seraphina felt the trap closing around them. Marcus's triumphant expression told her he'd planned this perfectly, knew that Drake's hands would be tied by the same laws that kept the werewolf kingdom stable. She looked up at Drake and saw the fury and helplessness warring in his expression. "How long?" Drake asked through gritted teeth. "How long would they be at the temple?" 3 days for the testing, the counselor replied. "And they must go alone, without your protection or influence. It's the only way to ensure the results are legitimate." "No." Drake's arms tightened around Seraphina. "Absolutely not. I won't send her and Luna away without protection." "Then you admit you have doubts about the prophecy?" Marcus challenged. "Or perhaps you simply want to keep the she-wolf for yourself, prophecy or not." It was a clever trap. If Drake refused, it would look like he was defying the council, an ancient law for personal reasons, undermining his authority as Alpha King. But if he agreed, he'd be sending Seraphina and Luna away without his protection, vulnerable to whatever schemes Marcus had planned. Seraphina made the decision before Drake could. She placed her hand over his heart, feeling it racing beneath her palm, and met his anguished gaze with as much courage as she could muster. "I'll go," she said firmly. "Luna and I will go to the temple and prove the prophecy is true. We don't need your protection to show the moon goddess's truth." "Seraphina, no. 3 days, Drake. That's all. And then we come back here, and Marcus has to leave us alone forever." She turned to face the council members, drawing on a strength she hadn't known she possessed. "I accept the terms. We'll leave in the morning." The triumph on Marcus's face should have warned her that she'd made a terrible mistake. But all Seraphina could focus on was the devastation in Drake's eyes as he realized he couldn't stop her, couldn't protect her, couldn't do anything but let her walk away. As the council members filed out and Marcus left with a final possessive look at Luna, Drake pulled Seraphina into a crushing embrace. 3 days, he whispered against her hair, his voice raw. "But if anything happens to you, if I feel even a hint of danger through our bond, I'm coming for you. Council be damned. Ancient law be damned. I will not lose you." Seraphina held him just as tightly, breathing in his scent and trying to memorize the feeling of safety his arms provided. Because somehow, she knew that the next 3 days were going to test them both in ways she couldn't yet imagine. And she was right to be afraid. Drake stood in the throne room 3 days after Seraphina had left for the sacred temple, his body coiled with tension that no amount of pacing could relieve. The incomplete mate bond stretched between them like a taut wire, carrying echoes of her emotions, anxiety, determination, and underneath it all, a current of fear that made his wolf snarl with the need to protect. "Still nothing from the temple?" Cyrus asked quietly, standing at a respectful distance. His beta knew better than to approach too closely when Drake was in this state, barely controlled fury radiating from every line of his body. "Nothing." Drake's hands clenched into fists. 3 days of silence. "They won't let me send messengers, won't allow any communication. The council?" He bit off the curse before it could fully form. "They're testing me, seeing if I'll break their precious ancient laws. And will you?" Cyrus's question held no judgment, only curiosity and loyalty. Drake turned to face his oldest friend, his eyes flashing amber. "If she needs me?" In a heartbeat. He moved to the window overlooking the kingdom, his gaze fixed in the direction of the sacred temple miles away. "I can feel her, Cyrus, through the bond. She's trying to be strong, but something's wrong. I know it." As if in response to his words, a sharp spike of terror suddenly lanced through the bond, so intense that Drake staggered, his hand shooting out to grip the window frame. Seraphina's fear flooded through him, raw and visceral and absolutely real. "Drake?" Cyrus was at his side instantly. "She's in danger." Drake was already moving, his decision made. "Gather the warriors. Everyone who can ride. We leave now. The council can go to hell." Drake's voice dropped to a growl as his wolf surged to the surface. That's my mate. My Luna. If anyone tries to stop me, they'll learn exactly why I'm the Alpha King. Within minutes, the palace courtyard filled with Drake's most loyal warriors, 20 of the fiercest wolves in the kingdom, all of them armed and ready to follow their alpha into battle. Drake shifted into his massive wolf form, larger and more powerful than any other, his midnight fur seeming to absorb the light around him. His amber eyes glowed with purpose and barely restrained violence. Through the bond, he felt another pulse of Seraphina's fear, and something else, rage. His mate was fighting back against whatever threatened her. Pride surged through him even as terror clawed at his chest. She was strong, his Seraphina, but she shouldn't have to face danger alone. Hold on, he thought desperately through the bond, not knowing if she could hear him but sending every ounce of his determination down that fragile connection. I'm coming. They ran. The journey that normally took 3 days on horseback, they covered in hours. Drake pushed himself beyond the limits of normal wolves, his royal blood and desperate need driving him faster than he'd ever run before. The warriors behind him matched his pace, their loyalty to their alpha king absolute. Behind them, the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of blood and fire. The sacred temple rose before them as darkness fell, ancient white stone glowing in the moonlight, surrounded by barriers of sacred energy that no wolf should be able to cross without permission from the priests. Drake didn't slow. He hit those barriers at full speed, his power crashing against them like a tidal wave against a dam. The barriers shattered. The sound echoed across the temple grounds like thunder, and suddenly wolves were pouring out of the buildings, temple guards in ceremonial armor, their faces shocked that anyone would dare breach the sacred protections. Drake shifted to his human form mid-run, not bothering with modesty as he strode naked and furious toward the temple entrance. Power rolled off him in waves, and the guards who moved to block his path took one look at his face and wisely stepped aside. Where is she? Drake's voice carried across the courtyard, filled with enough command that every wolf present felt compelled to answer. Where is Seraphina Winterborn? A figure emerged from the main temple building. High Priest Tobias, his ceremonial robes pristine and his expression carefully neutral. But Drake's enhanced senses caught the spike of fear in the man's scent, the slight tremor in his hands. Guilt. The priest reeked of guilt. Alpha King, Tobias said, his voice oily and false. You violate sacred ground. The council will hear of this. The council can watch me tear you apart if you don't answer my question. Drake stalked forward, and Cyrus appeared at his side, having shifted and now holding clothes for his alpha. Drake barely noticed as his beta helped him dress, his entire focus on the corrupt priest. My mate was brought here for testing. Where is she? The she-wolf failed the trials. Tobias's smile was cruel. The mark on her child was revealed as false, created through dark magic. According to ancient law, both mother and pup have been remanded to the custody of the child's father, Marcus Thornhart. Rage, unlike anything Drake had ever felt, exploded through his chest. You're lying. I delivered that child myself. I saw the mark appear. There was no magic involved. There is proof, a new voice interrupted, and Marcus stepped out from behind the high priest. His expression was triumphant, though he kept a careful distance from Drake's barely controlled fury. The priests performed the sacred rituals. The moon goddess was consulted. Your attachment to the she-wolf has clouded your judgment, but the truth is clear. Luna is my daughter, and Seraphina is mine to reclaim. Over my dead body. Drake's voice dropped to something barely human, his wolf bleeding through every word. Where are they, Thornhart? What have you done? Nothing that isn't within my rights. Marcus gestured toward the temple behind him. They're being prepared for transport back to Silvermoon territory. By morning, they'll be home where they belong. Through the bond, Drake felt another surge of Seraphina's emotions. desperation, fury, and underlying it all, fierce determination. She was fighting. His mate was fighting back against her captors, refusing to give up even when everything seemed lost. The realization filled him with both pride and terror. "You want her?" Drake asked, his voice deadly calm now. "Then you'll have to go through me to get her. I challenge you, Marcus Thornhart. Deathmatch. The winner takes Seraphina and Luna. The loser feeds the crows." Gasps rippled through the assembled wolves. The council members who had been gathering to watch the confrontation all began speaking at once, but Drake ignored them. His eyes remained fixed on Marcus, waiting for the coward to refuse, to hide behind ancient laws and priestly robes. But Marcus surprised him. The other alpha's expression hardened with resolve, and he stepped forward into the open space that was rapidly being cleared in the center of the courtyard. "I accept, and when I kill you, Drake Nightshade, everyone will know that even the Alpha King can fall. Then try." Drake moved to meet him in the impromptu arena, his body already beginning to shift. "And learn why I've never lost." The transformation rippled through him, bones breaking and reforming, muscles expanding, fur erupting across his skin. His wolf form emerged massive and terrible, built for war and dominance. Across from him, Marcus shifted too, his sandy brown wolf large but nowhere near Drake's size or power. They circled each other as the moon rose higher, bathing the combat arena in silver light. The assembled wolves fell silent, hundreds of eyes watching as their alpha king prepared to fight for his mate. Drake could feel Seraphina through the bond, could sense her awareness of what was happening even though she couldn't see it. He sent every ounce of his love and determination down that connection, promising her silently that he would win, that nothing would keep him from her. Marcus attacked first, lunging for Drake's throat with snapping jaws. Drake sidestepped easily, his superior speed making Marcus's attack look clumsy and telegraphed. He could have ended it there. One strike to Marcus's exposed flank would have gutted the other wolf, but Drake held back. Not from mercy, but because he wanted everyone watching to understand the vast difference between them. Wanted Marcus to know, in his final moments, that he had never stood a chance. They clashed again and again, fangs and claws tearing through fur and flesh. Marcus fought with desperation, knowing his life depended on victory. But Drake fought with something stronger: love. Every strike he landed was for Seraphina's humiliation at the rejection ceremony. Every bite was for the tears he'd seen in her eyes when she spoke of feeling worthless. Every moment of dominance was proof that his mate had chosen correctly when she'd accepted his protection. Blood stained the white stone of the temple courtyard, Marcus's mostly. The other alpha was slowing, his movements becoming sluggish as wounds accumulated. Drake pressed his advantage, driving Marcus back step by step, showing the watching alphas what happened to anyone who threatened his mate. "Yield," Drake growled, the word barely recognizable through his wolf's throat. "And I'll make your death quick." Marcus's answering snarl was defiant, but Drake could smell the fear beneath it. The other alpha knew he'd lost, but pride wouldn't let him surrender. He gathered himself for one final desperate attack. And in that moment, Drake felt something change through the bond. Power surged from Seraphina's end of the connection, so strong and pure that it made his wolf stumble mid-strike. Not pain, not fear. This was something else entirely. Divine power, ancient and overwhelming, flooding through their incomplete bond like lightning through water. Drake's head whipped around, his instincts screaming that Seraphina needed him, that something monumental was happening. And that moment of distraction was all Marcus needed. The other alpha struck, his jaws closing around Drake's front leg with crushing force. Drake snarled in pain and fury, but before he could retaliate, Marcus wrenched sideways using Drake's own momentum against him. The Alpha King went down, his injured leg unable to support his weight, and suddenly Marcus was above him, teeth aimed for his throat. A silver blur slammed into Marcus from the side, knocking him away from Drake with impossible force. Drake scrambled to his feet, ignoring the pain in his leg, and stared in awe at what he was seeing. A wolf stood between him and Marcus, a female wolf with a coat of pure silver that seemed to glow in the moonlight. She was smaller than the males but radiated power that made every wolf present instinctively submit. Her eyes, when they met Drake's, were familiar silver pools filled with fierce determination and love. Seraphina. His mate had shifted into her wolf form for the first time since her pregnancy, and the result was magnificent. More than magnificent, divine. The silver fur that marked her as special, as chosen. Behind her, held gently in the jaws of a massive spectral wolf that could only be the moon goddess's own avatar, was a basket containing Luna. Through the bond, Drake felt everything. Seraphina's awakening in the dungeon, the moon goddess's voice speaking truth directly into her soul, the chains breaking under newfound strength. His mate had saved herself, had saved their daughter, and now stood between him and death, with courage that made his heart swell with pride and love so intense it hurt. Marcus recovered from being knocked aside and lunged at Seraphina with a snarl of rage. Without hesitation, she met his attack head-on. Her silver form moved with grace and power, defending Drake even though she'd barely learned to fight. The blow that Marcus landed should have sent her flying, should have broken bones. Instead, Seraphina absorbed it with barely a flinch, divine protection surrounding her like armor. The mark on Luna's forehead, visible even from the basket, began to glow, brighter and brighter until golden light exploded outward in waves. The light touched Drake first, wrapping around him like warm silk, and suddenly the incomplete bond with Seraphina blazed to full life. He felt everything she felt, her love for him, her determination to protect him, her absolute certainty that they were meant to be together. And he knew she felt the same from him, the depths of his devotion and need finally laid bare. The golden light spread to encompass Seraphina, and she shifted back to human form, in a cascade of silver sparks. She stood naked and magnificent before the assembled wolves, the golden mark from Luna's forehead now mirrored on her own skin, a crescent moon between her brows that proclaimed her as the prophesied queen. Drake shifted too, moving to stand beside his mate, and gasped as the mark appeared on his forehead as well. The three of them, Alpha, Luna, and prophesied child, were bound together in golden light that grew brighter with each passing second. Then the moon goddess's voice rang out across the temple grounds, coming from everywhere and nowhere, resonating in the bones of every wolf present. Behold the true royal family, the Alpha King who has waited with patience, the Queen who has been tested by rejection and found worthy, the child who will unite all kingdoms. They are blessed by my hand and chosen by destiny. Let any who would challenge this truth face divine judgment. The light intensified, becoming almost too bright to look at directly. When it finally faded, Marcus lay crumpled on the ground, his wolf form burned away to reveal the man underneath. He was alive but broken, divine fire having seared through him as judgment for his crimes. High Priest Tobias and two other priests who had helped him were similarly struck down, the moon goddess's justice absolute and terrifying. Seraphina swayed on her feet, the power that had filled her suddenly withdrawing, leaving her drained. Drake caught her before she could fall, pulling her against his chest and wrapping her in his warmth. His injured leg protested, but he ignored the pain. All that mattered was that she was safe, that Luna was safe, that they were together. "I've got you," he whispered against her hair, the same words he'd spoken when he'd first delivered Luna. "Always. I'll always have you." "I know." Seraphina's arms came around him weakly, her face pressed to his chest. "I felt you coming for me. Through the bond. You broke through sacred barriers and defied the council and fought for us. I'll always fight for you." Drake pulled back just enough to cup her face, his thumbs brushing away the tears streaming down her cheeks. "You're my mate, my queen, my everything. I don't care what laws I have to break or what enemies I have to face. You and Luna are mine to protect. And you're mine to protect too, Seraphina said with a watery smile. That's what mates do. They save each other. Around them, the assembled alphas and council members were dropping to their knees, heads bowed in submission and awe. The spectral wolf that held Luna's basket approached, and as it set the basket gently at Seraphina's feet, it transformed into the most beautiful woman Drake had ever seen. The moon goddess herself, manifested in physical form. "Complete your bond," she said, her voice melodious and filled with affection. "Let all present witness the union that will change the destiny of every werewolf kingdom. No longer will the territories be divided. Under your joint rule, peace and prosperity will reign for generations to come." Drake looked at Seraphina, seeing his own overwhelming love reflected in her silver eyes. This moment, standing in the ruins of a corrupt temple surrounded by wolves who had doubted them both, was perhaps not the romantic setting he would have chosen for completing their mate bond. But it was perfect in its truth. They had fought for each other, bled for each other, defied laws and traditions to be together. Now they would claim each other before the moon goddess herself and every alpha in the realm. "I claim you, Seraphina Winterborn," Drake said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "As my mate, my queen, my partner in all things. I swear to protect you, cherish you, and stand beside you until my last breath." "I claim you, Drake Nightshade," Seraphina responded, her voice growing stronger with each word. "As my mate, my king, my heart. I swear to love you, support you, and fight beside you no matter what comes." They kissed, and the world exploded. The mate bond completed with a force that sent shockwaves rippling outward. The combined power of an alpha king and his prophesied queen, creating something unprecedented. The corrupted temple began to change, darkness bleeding out of the very stones, replaced by pure white light. The sacred barriers reformed, stronger and truer than before. Every wolf present felt the weight of divine approval settling over them like a blessing. When Drake and Seraphina finally pulled apart, breathless and glowing with shared power, the moon goddess smiled. "Rise, Alpha King Drake and Queen Seraphina. Take your daughter and return home. Your kingdom awaits its true rulers." The goddess faded like morning mist, but her presence lingered in the renewed temple and the marks that glowed on 3 foreheads. Drake bent to retrieve Luna from her basket, cradling the pup against his chest while keeping one arm around Seraphina. His daughter, because Luna was his now in every way that mattered, made soft cooing sounds and reached for his face with tiny hands. Cyrus approached, bowing deeply. "My king, my queen, the warriors await your command." "Then let's go home," Drake said, looking down at Seraphina with a smile that transformed his usually harsh features into something breathtaking. "Our kingdom needs to meet its queen." As they walked from the temple courtyard, Luna secure in Drake's arms and Seraphina held close against his side, the assembled alphas parted before them. Respect, awe, and no small amount of fear showed on their faces. They had witnessed history tonight, the fulfillment of an ancient prophecy, and the rise of a queen who would change everything. Marcus remained where he'd fallen, broken but alive, forced to watch his former mate walk away with the male who truly deserved her. The message was clear. Mercy could be more devastating than death. The journey home took 3 days, but Drake and Seraphina barely noticed. They traveled in the royal carriage, unable to keep their hands off each other now that the bond was complete. Between caring for Luna and losing themselves in each other, time seemed to blur into one perfect golden moment. When the Obsidian Palace finally came into view, Seraphina gasped. The entire kingdom had turned out to welcome them home. Thousands of wolves lining the streets, all of them dropping to their knees as the carriage passed. She saw faces filled with hope and joy, heard voices raised in celebration. These were her people now, her responsibility, her family. Drake must have sensed her nervousness, because his hand found hers and squeezed gently. You don't have to be anything other than yourself. They don't need a perfect queen. They need a strong one, a compassionate one, a queen who understands rejection and pain and triumph. They need you, Seraphina, exactly as you are. She looked at him, this powerful male who had crashed through sacred barriers to save her, who had fought for her when everyone said she wasn't worthy, who had seen past her rejection to the strength underneath. I love you, she said simply. I don't think I've said it yet, but I do. Completely. I love you too. Drake's amber eyes blazed with emotion. My queen, my mate, my Seraphina. They entered the palace to cheers and celebration that lasted through the night. And as Drake carried both Seraphina and Luna up to their chambers, their shared chambers now, Seraphina knew with absolute certainty that she was exactly where she was meant to be. The rejection that had seemed like the end of her world had instead been the beginning of everything. Her daughter would grow up knowing love and security, her mate would stand beside her as they united the kingdoms, and she, the rejected she-wolf who had been deemed unworthy, would be queen. The moon goddess's ways were mysterious indeed. But as Drake laid her gently on their bed, and Luna slept peacefully in her cradle, surrounded by love and protection and hope for the future, Seraphina sent up a prayer of gratitude. She had been broken by rejection, but she had been reborn into something stronger, something destined, something beautiful, and her story was only just beginning.